So, welcome, Daniel. We're live on Facebook. I'm very excited to today sort of launch a new series in the CoCreativeSex podcast series that's on unconditional love, but we're going to kind of get at it from different angles. So, I have a wonderful guest today called Daniel Wang, and he's a coach and a sort of really courageous and determined personal development person who's really gone in and done the work. And we're going to sort of go in and have the real conversations where a lot of people struggle, but, make it, it seems difficult to talk about. So we're going to sort of open up on conversations, and hopefully somehow this will be of interest to you and help you out on your personal journey of getting to those places of unconditional love for yourself, and even allowing it to happen in your life. And we're going to sort of get our teeth into this and sort of get a better sense of how does this all play out in our lives, these different forces. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Julie, very much for inviting me onto your podcast. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's really nice. You look all handsome today. I love it.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about, because I know that you're a coach. I'd love you to hear a little bit about your practice, what you do, just to give a sort of situate yourself for people that are listening to us.
Yeah, I'm a coach. I support people at creating the life that they want, supporting them at recognizing, gaining clarity on the blocks in their life, how they're holding themselves back, their relationship with their mind, their emotions, their body, and really supporting them at allowing them to discover their own process. Because it's really all about the self-healing journey. And I believe everyone heals themselves and is capable of healing themselves. But often they're lacking support, and they've lacked that support in life to recognize their own abilities to heal themselves.
Yeah.
And for me, healing simply means going from something unwanted to something that is desired and wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we adapt or adopt these ways of being that we think have defined us and who we are. And it's sort of like taking that all off piece by piece and sort of realizing like we can completely reinvent ourselves in a way that feels much more aligned with ourselves. And I think you're going to sort of give us a little bit of that today. Whenever I talk to you, you've mentioned a lot this 10-year period in your life that was hell, or really difficult and really harsh. Can you give us a bit of a description of why that period was so difficult? And maybe from what age to what age?
Yeah, I would say from my late teens to late 20s. There was a 10-year journey that I went on that initially started off very challenging, very painful. I went through a lot of misery, a lot of suffering. And now looking back, I can recognize that's due to me having certain viewpoints about myself and the way I thought about myself, having all these expectations, and then just me finding myself less than, that constant comparison piece, because I wasn't doing what my expectations, what I expected of myself to be doing at that time.
Just, I always find it like I'm a very story person. I
Mhm.
love jumping into the stories and
Yeah.
making it alive for people. Is there like one or two anecdotes that you could give us that sort of give us the gist of what you were dealing with? What was causing that misery? Like, if can you give us like one example?
I just always remember from a very young age being so incredibly shy and just like painfully shy, like so socially anxious from a very young age, all throughout elementary and junior high, high school. And it was just so tough in, as junior high and high school and socialization begins, to be comfortable in my own skin. I found it so difficult to be comfortable in my own skin. And I tried so hard at fitting into all the different kinds of groups in high school, for example. But because I was trying to fit in with everyone, I recognized I was kind of fragmenting myself and like scattered myself into all these pieces. And then also being a sensitive person, an empath, I could feel energies I recognize. Now looking back, I felt all the energies that was around me, all the emotional energies, and identified with them. I thought they were mine. So I believed in the anxiety in my body, and I believed the stories that my mind started telling. And that made it really difficult for me to do well in school because of my inability to feel comfortable in my own skin and to develop those authentic friendships and relationships, because I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused me so much, yeah, intense social anxiety, which led to depression, and taking antidepressants challenged me further. That it was really challenging to do well in school, and dropping out in grade 11, for example. And for me to be a mainland Chinese immigrant, I had such shame and judgments about myself through that. And just like there's these piles and piles of self hate and judgment that over time, by the end of my high school years, I was just a wreck of a human being, quite frankly, emotionally, physically, mentally. And I wasn't able to continue into post-secondary like my peers did. So I just deemed myself as a complete waste and wreck and loser, basically.
Right. So like there's
Yeah.
this huge heaviness that you're carrying. And it's like part of it's like you taking all these beliefs about yourself, but there's a bit of a context too in which you're living in. So can you tell us a little bit like where you grew up and like what was the kind of what was the kind of socialization process that you were trying to fit into?
Yeah. I do recognize now, being a sensitive child and never having my father around, because he was dealing with his own traumas, and he went through a lot of challenges immigrating to Canada and the West, and then he was not around in my life. And then my mom was also very challenged immigrating to Western society and was dealing with a lot of mental illness and emotional challenges. And now I recognize that really affected me so deeply that I had no understanding of as a child. So I recognize as a child, I never felt safe. I actually never felt safe to express myself emotionally, never felt the safety to get to know myself or explore who I really am and get to, expand and evolve that and bring that forth. So I was recognized, I was always trying to fit myself into other people's frameworks, if you will.
Right.
And therefore, I recognize how much geared towards conforming to others,
Right.
and also through socializing through Western pop culture and loving Western pop culture. But I also recognize those conditionings that I took on from all of that.
Yeah.
And now recognizing, because I never saw myself in most of those shows and movies, I recognize I didn't give myself a chance to find my place in all these stories and the worlds that I was being entertained by, if you will.
Right. So give
So
us like one movie that was like left this really strong impression on you and but you felt the clash with like not fitting in. Like is there one movie that you feel like jumps out as like wow, that kind of captures it?
I mean, some of my favorite childhood movies I remember are things like Jerry Maguire and Forrest Gump, like, Castaway, like, and I watched those like over and over again. Now I realize it's because I got to go on that hero's journey that I was feeling and witnessing and experiencing along with these characters. Um, and and the stories that I saw people that look like me and what was possible for those that look like me was a much different kind of journey. And it was one, basically, you go to school, your marks are the most important thing. You need to go to post-secondary and get good schooling education so you can get a good career and have that safety and start earning that money, and then live a normal life, retire and die, kind of thing. So that was the story. I thought that was inevitable for me. And I was trying to force myself to go down that road while I was so enamored and totally connected, now looking back, with all these other stories being told through pop culture, through, yeah, through those creative souls that allowed themselves that exploration, expression.
Mm-hmm.
So that,
So
mhm.
yeah, so I guess like in one way, like there's this kind of trajectory that's kind of created your mind about what works like for you, what you should be doing as this young Asian man in a, Western society, what's this role, going out, succeeding, getting your job in the bank, and then, and
Yeah.
then after basically retiring because you have this money and just that kind of perfect little lifestyle. And that just did not stick with you, right?
Yeah, I guess it was just wasn't inspiring for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just and I had all these expectations that that's what I should be going after, and I thought it was going to be inevitable for me, if you will. But I recognized that I just couldn't go down that road.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So did you feel like where you grew up in Canada made a difference? Do you think like do you want to talk a little bit about what city or town you grew up in, or is that important to you in
Um,
in
I
your
do
biography?
I do recognize that is an important factor. Like having been grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and just the way I experienced that city, I felt a lot of well, just conforming energies. It's
Mm-hmm.
like there's only a few roads that you can go down, and everyone
Yeah.
was kind of like holding each other to that.
Yeah.
That's what I experienced.
What were the possibilities like that were acceptable in that environment?
It just seems being normal. Like, because that was my dream. That's the thing. I didn't know how to give myself permission to dream, and my dream was to be normal.
Yes. So I'm just trying to get at like what's the definition of normal? And I
Yeah,
I totally get it
basically,
means
yeah,
something.
yeah.
We're
Basically,
all up
go,
against it.
yeah,
But what is that normal?
go to school, get a
Yeah.
degree, get a
Yeah.
job, get a girlfriend,
Yeah.
start paying bills, buy a house, live life. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
And so you are not checking any of those boxes.
Now I can recognize because of my emotional challenges, I wasn't able to be like normal or go through school and enjoy all the good
Right.
things school has to offer in the learning and move through that growth phase. Because it can be a very beautiful journey
Yeah.
if it appeals to you and if you like it and if you
Right.
but I recognized my challenges and I was not able to mm, perform the way that I had expected myself to, and then
Right.
therefore that created all the shame and guilt energy.
Yeah. So what I'm getting is like there's this ideal of what you thought you were supposed to be doing. It wasn't happening. And there was this real desire to conform or be, normal, or there was this conforming energy. There wasn't a lot of role models around you about all the different possibilities. It just seemed like there was this one route, and for some reason it was not happening, and it was causing a lot of grief for you because you just couldn't hit those check marks. And so and I totally get that, like, when we're trying to achieve something that we think is significant for society and it's just not happening, it's like it's a headache and it's upsetting because the feedback you're giving yourself all the time is, wow, I'm sort of like a failure in the society. I can't do the thing that everyone else is doing. And yet, it's also an invitation to be that original trailblazer, pioneer type person. So there's this kind of opportunity in this as well of not fitting in and being like, hey, like this doesn't really jive for me. But just to dig a bit deeper before we go into like what you discovered, like it, because you obviously have discovered some important things on this journey of not fitting into the conforming path, basically. There's some definite gifts going down that path that are hard, but they're definite powerful things at the end that come out of that. But yeah, I remember you telling me that in that 10-year period, like even sexuality was like a huge, huge, huge challenge for you. Um, and that's when we kind of see how sexuality is so interconnected with how we feel about ourselves, um, how we feel we're valued by the society we're in. There's all these factors that come into play. So could you share a little bit about that sort of sexual journey or non-sexual journey, whatever was there for you, just to bring us into the world of some of the struggles on the sexual level and relational level?
Yeah. I recognize being raised by a single mom had its effects on me. And being so shy, introverted, anxious, it was difficult for me in like high school when I was dating. Um, I remember, for example, a lot of the first moves, like I would, my girlfriend would be so tired of waiting for me, and like they would like kind of just go for it with me, if you will. Um, and just being so anxious back then, I just recognized I didn't know how to be authentic, and
Mm.
yeah, I didn't, and through that, therefore, I wasn't able to create, experience that intimacy with girlfriends or with people I'm attracted to. And I certainly allowed the immense fear of rejection and expressing myself just completely hold me back and hold me in small.
Can you
Um,
go that into that a little bit, like that fear of rejection? Like
yeah,
what does that, what's the world of that?
yeah, just that it's yeah this in it was definitely a really immense fear because it's like my self-worth was reliant upon how much approval I can gain, and I was afraid to be rejected, so I wouldn't make a lot of first moves. That was my problem. Is I was just afraid to make the first move, and just never did really. um, and I recognized how much that prevented me from realizing what I was capable of or what was open to me, because
Mm-hmm.
I was just completely just yeah, I was just really that anxious and scared.
Yeah. Like what would they, if they rejected you, what would it have meant to you?
Yeah, that I was less than, that I was not good enough, that I was yeah, um, yeah, basically not lovable.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mm. Yeah.
Wasn't worthy.
Right, right.
Hmm.
So, okay, so let's recap that. So basically, you kind of were in a situation where you're really, really shy, and there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of worries that you might not be good enough. And so you end up actually not making a lot of the first move. And, you know, why? I mean, some people, they're monks and they never have sex, and they chose that as their path, or some form of priest. But why do you feel like that was like an important experience for you? Like that, why was this a heavy thing to carry? Like that feeling of that you weren't engaged in this activity.
Now I recognize just how much creative energy and sexual energy I do have
Hmm.
that kind of courses through my body. And back then, just due to the way my thinking and my upbringing conditionings, I had no idea how to honor that in myself. The fact that I was creative, that
Hmm.
I did have a lot of creative energy, which is, in my view, the same as sexual energy.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of judgments about, well, sex and my own sexuality,
Right.
whether it's due to my upbringing or just a lack of support around me or education about
Hmm.
what that all is.
Yeah. Well, what would have been that education? Like, what would be the messages around sex that you'd be carrying?
Yeah, coming from an immigrant family, there was certainly no sharing from either of my parents. Being raised by a single mom, there's certainly no mention of it all. Like, and then raising myself on Western pop culture TV and learning all the kind of the media pop culture values regards to all of that, and therefore having these expectations of myself about how I should go about that.
Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I find it so interesting because it's so interesting. Like on pop culture, they talk, let's say, a lot about sex, but it's very limited what you actually see about sex on TV, or there's not a lot of variety. So I'm just curious, like, how would you describe the values that you got from pop culture about sex? Like, what were the messages that you identify that you were like, oh my God, this is like a bar that I need to get to because everyone's talking about this?
Well, I mean, obvious things is like the people who are good looking, the jocks, if you're a man, it's like tall, and then now, especially looking back in late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of East Asian male representation at all,
Right.
especially in a light that I could look up to in a normal way, if you will.
Right.
So that I recognize the effect that that had.
Yeah.
And then so it's like all these jocks, if you had money, if you had prestige and social status and obvious external social status, then those are the ones that get to have that experience.
Right. Okay. I'm so happy you named all those things. So I'm like, now we know what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, it's so true. Like there's a lot of creation of imagery and storylines. It's all the beautiful people, and it almost feels like it's this world that's inaccessible if you're not looking like that. And so there's a lot of a visual, um, a lot of a yeah, sort of a packaging and these values of like what makes you valuable. It's like you say, it's the status, it's the class, it's the looks that make you attractive, desirable. And there's different maybe little fine tunings for men and women, but definitely it leaves like a definite pressure. And then you brought in the whole element too of not having a lot of Asian men that are out there being the desired one and the one that's like the powerful guy that everyone wants, or the main guy that is the main character of the movie. So there's this kind of real void in terms of like you identifying and feeling like valued. Yeah, because all these movies, they basically are signifying what's important, and so it's a very 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 limited, you know, um, peephole or box of what is valuable. There's not a lot of possibilities. I kind of get excited today when I start seeing more and more shows where it's not the perfect beauties anymore that are making it big. It's like they're interesting and they're still beautiful, but like they don't have the perfect, perfectly shaped bodies or perfectly shaped faces, and they have character. I've been seeing more and more of that. Not that I watch a lot of TV and everything, but but it's kind of like it's starting to open up to possibilities. But yeah, so it's this again, this kind of like everyone is it just shows how much power this mass media has on our young brains. You're watching all this when you're 13, 14, 15, and then you spend up to like 30 years old, like burdened with these things. And I mean, I'm sure you're still dealing with it to some degree. I know I'm still dealing with it. We always have to deconstruct all these things that have been made into the most valuable thing. um, and we had a little bit of this conversation about that point system. Like people have this conversation about the point system, but it's the same thing. Like, what's the point system based on? It's based on this little box of like what's deemed beautiful, what's deemed important and desirable. And so then we're again hurting ourselves in terms of what we're supposed to look like in the prison that it puts us into, right? So, okay, that's really exciting. So, when do you feel like you started having a breakthrough in terms of, moving past these constraining, maybe even before that, maybe before we go into breakthroughs, like where did these stresses and anxieties, like did you find yourself in any situation that was really compromising because you had all these ideas in your head, but then you're doing things that maybe you didn't want to be doing, or that you were in environments that you felt weren't the best for you, but you were kind of like trying to find yourself? Is there anything you can share on that?
I do recognize, for example, raving back in the high school days, right? And experimenting with mind-opening kind of mind-altering substances
Yeah.
really opened me up in a way to experience more of myself. Like it brought a certain level of creativity out through me that I didn't know existed in me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was impactful to help to open me up in a way.
Mm.
But I can also see how that's stimulated my mind to be in judgment of myself, because I bought into what the message was about exploring with such experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So that was significant on my journeys. And I recognized those experiences was a healing for me in a way that started to open my heart up and to
Mm,
into myself, and realizing I had all these layers and sides of me that I didn't know existed.
mm,
At the same time, creating these additional like mental burdens and judgments of self
right.
that prevented me from being able to support in the deeper healing work and the more holistic piece that these experiences can be a balanced part of, now that I can see that. But because of my lack of support and self-support, it kind of cracked me open even more and made me even more sensitive to how different I was, or how I didn't want to go down that normal path.
Right. Well, it sounds like you were really having these spiritual experiences of like things that were opening up for you, and at the same time, not knowing exactly how to integrate it.
Yeah, very much so.
And did you find like you like 'cause some there's different ways that different substances can act on people. Sometimes it can bring you down the path of addiction because you're like, okay, I want to get to that state again and again and again. Um, and yet you're also talking about how, hey, like this gave you an experience of the possibility, and you're like, okay, you have that flag to work towards. It might not be through using drugs or whatever it is all the time, but like that exists, and like how do you get there? So how did those two dynamics play out for you?
Yeah, it was a number of years, and I certainly have abused them. For example, in my late teens, used them as an escape.
Mm-hmm.
For example, yeah, something like marijuana, I was definitely using to self-soothe and self-medicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly found it more helpful than antidepressants for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which can be addictive too, right? They're
oh,
still drugs.
yeah. Mhm. But it took me, but those judgments I had about myself took me down a really dark hole. And luckily now I can be so grateful that I went so far down, that I kind of detached from my peer influences. And
Mm-hmm.
from the rock bottom, I started finding my way up and learning about the 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 holistic framework, like just what
Yeah.
it took to help myself feel better, what I ate, and actually taking good care of my body, and learning about all the different practices like eating healthy and eating raw and organic, or yoga. I discovered yoga on my own in my year post-secondary I went to, for example, and I recognized how those pieces started coming in, and I started to support myself in my self-healing,
Yeah.
um, in this holistic way, more
So
and
it
more.
sounds like you're starting to find these tools, and they weren't the conventional way. It wasn't like go take the antidepressant, or do this or do this that would be sort of deemed normal. But you're like, okay, this health piece. It might not be in my environment, but it feels good. And you start building that kind of toolbox
Yeah.
that's empowering. What did your rock bottom look like when you really got to the bottom and you're like, okay, I really have to do something here. What did that look like?
Yeah, gosh. I mean, now I recognize I incurred patterns of bulimia and agoraphobia. Like,
Ah.
I was in such just emotional distress in a fairly constant basis that it was so hard for me to hold down even minimum wage jobs back then. I had such judgment about not, graduating high school like I'm supposed to. And so I would often be so anxious about going to work that I would, abandon like jobs. And that filled me with such immense shame and self-hate and dread, and made me so fearful of the world that I literally would hide for days, weeks, and sometimes months on end, just
Mm.
because I was living in a situation where I was living in the basement, and I had a room with no windows, frankly, and I was just helping to rent out the other rooms in the house. So, and I would just hide in that room, and I wasn't even able to call like my mother, for example, for sometimes for months. And certainly even no friends as well. Like I felt so alone.
Like total
And
isolation.
yeah, absolutely. Total isolation. Like I would literally wait till night time to go outside to go grocery shopping, because I was filled with so much shame
Wow.
and guilt that I couldn't even bear people looking at me.
Like
It
you
got
really felt like you were quote unquote a failure.
absolutely. I just totally saw myself as a complete, just just, I was disgusted with myself because of the bulimia patterns that I was experiencing of feast and famine, just going to the grocery store and buying all this junk and just stuffing my emotions away,
Right.
and then completely in shame and not understanding what I was going through, not understanding it was actually an emotional and
Yeah.
psychological problem that I was dealing with, and it was a disease that I was going through.
Yeah.
I was just in complete judgment of myself.
Well, and I think like I've seen this a lot with people that are very intuitive and very perceptive and very empathic human beings. At first, if they're living through different traumas, it's so hard for them to see that it's a trauma because it's just, it's just so real.
Yeah.
Everything is so real. And so, yeah, to eat and to sort of step it down so you're not feeling as much totally makes sense to me, anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I mean, I've heard this from men a lot that, there's a feeling like when you don't feel good about your job or you don't feel good financially, it's really hard too to feel good about being in a relationship with a woman.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I certainly hadn't gave myself no chances to, yeah, even interact with girls or women back then. And what's significant, I was realized I had this belief that, especially from the cultural upbringing I had, that unless I had money and status, I didn't deserve intimacy.
Right.
And
That's a
I
huge
now,
one.
yeah, I realized how violent, how painful of a life sentence I gave to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Hmm.
love it how you frame your experiences. It's always like you kind of giving this to yourself in a way, but it's because you didn't know how to do anything better. Like that's also how you came to conclude and explain your life to yourself. But you're also part of this mechanism of like sort of not self sabotaging, but re living it out. Kind of you kind of made it kind of last, or perpetuate. The word I'm looking for is perpetuate. It gets re-perpetuated over and over again. um, so yeah, that's really interesting to get to that place now then about like what helped you break the cycle, because it's a cycle that you get into and you're it's a downward spiral, and that you keep on reinforcing that you're not good, you're not attractive, you don't deserve things, that you're not good enough, you have to hide. Even, not even being out in the daylight like is too much. And I can just want to tell you, like, I just have so much compassion, because that is a hard place to be at when you don't even want people to look at you and see you. So wow, like I just want to say, like, I know you now. And I know that it just shows to me the work that you've done has been so um, significant. So tell us a little bit about what those turning points. So you said you started doing self practices of yoga, getting out a little bit more, eating better. But where was the soul life kind of starting to shift? Where did things start moving for you there?
Yeah, I realized I started following my curiosity and started to try and experiment with different things. And I recognized I was able to do that in a way and give myself permission to do that because I had no attachments to peer influences. I didn't have my boys and my homies holding me to a certain idea of what I'm supposed to be, in a sense. So
Because you had
I,
isolated yourself for so long. Because at
yeah,
high
exactly.
school, it was important.
Yeah, very much so.
Then you
Yeah,
had sort of like gone into your cocoon, and like no, the world wasn't there anymore.
exactly.
It's you and
So
yourself.
So I recognized how I started to, first of all, just eating fruits and vegetables, and then actually learning about fruits and vegetables, actually learning and studying up and reading books and learning from people that have explored their own health and empowering their own health for years, and about just how powerful raw, organic, plant-based choices are. And I started investing, a significant part of my income to raw foods and organic produce. And back then it was like very not common at all in the early 2000s. And then, discovering yoga and just completely like finding the resonance in being so connected with that practice,
Mm-hmm.
showed me something about myself. And that practice so supported me at being able to hold myself while releasing, you know, the toxins, if you will, through sweat, and being able to over time, release the emotional energies.
Mm.
that I was ready to let go of.
I find
And
that description so beautiful because it just goes to show like you're like self-educating yourself, you know. You're on this journey, you got into your cocoon, you're in this, you know, complete isolation, but then you start reaching, you start finding, listen, almost like following your intuition and then becoming aware, like just doing yoga and being so impacted. Some people could do yoga, but they might not feel anything, but you feel it at such a deep, profound level and start observing it on yourself and seeing, wow, I'm even like releasing my toxins. My brain is like liberated. I don't feel all that charge anymore. Like you're just, it's like moving. So it's amazing that you're like having this finesse of an experience, like you're observing it in a very acute way, which also says something about you, right?
yeah, I will say I wasn't that aware back then. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, with my awareness, hindsight's 2020.
Right.
And because I recognized how holistic my process was, so the food, the physical, I started to change the programming I was in training myself with through the entertainment, the pop culture. So over time, I started watching, CBS educational programs and seminars. I started bringing more positive documentaries and learning about all of this. I started to really and deepen my taste in art, getting into different art from different cultures and feeling into the depth and the profound nature that art really is, and allowing myself to
Absolutely.
be enlivened and inspired by the art I choose. And then the other piece is like, like I started, the companionship I had through starting all those years was Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Eckhart Tolle, Chit Nhat Hanh, Pema Chodron, Jack Kornfield, Ram Dass, Wayne, all these amazing, Terence McKenna, Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell. These were significant companions of mine that I spent
Mm.
significant time with constantly, listening to them speak about life, right?
Right.
That along with the yoga and exercise and drinking more water and sleeping better, all it's for me, it's such a holistic
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because there was a period, like you say, like maybe pre 2000, where even, you know, like I don't know if you were like me growing up in the 80s and the 90s, but there was a very much of a very materialistic framework for life. And, you know, I think anyone that has a bit of a spiritual sensitivity and more connected to maybe that wisdom stream, it's like it can be very suffocating, you know? And it sounds as though then, yeah, there's this blossoming of more of that wisdom, you know, holistic approach and mind, body, soul, spirit, and understanding us as multi-layered human beings as opposed to just these hormones and this DNA and purely physicality, and you know, living a very consumeristic life and getting fed on things that don't have a lot of depth. You know, it feels like, yeah, suddenly you tapped into something so much more deeper, opened up with that, even that cultural, artistic piece. It's just like opening up the blinders on the human experience and how to show it in art. It's a really profound shift, and it's like it's beautiful to see this kind of lost soul, quote unquote. I don't want to necessarily like put words there for you if it doesn't resonate, but then like you kind of go into your cocoon and then coming out and sort of finding things that are unconventional by, you know, your standards of what you grew up with, but suddenly responding to something deeper, this deeper yearning inside of you that makes sense. Does that does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I recognize I was started to reconnect to myself and
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, my pure intention for this life. Because now I look back and now opening up to another story of what this experience is I want to love. I want to experience what love is, and I care so much that I as a soul chose to come in as a highly sensitive person. I know I chose the circumstances, the cultural origins, the family origins that my soul chose that so that I could experience the pain that was being felt in this world by people that I loved, right? And go through being traumatized and growing up in Western society and taking on all of those, whether they're patriarchy or toxic masculine ideas, and trying to fit into them, trying to hold them in myself, and experiencing all of that and what that did to me, and experiencing the effects.
Mm-hmm.
So allowing myself to feel it and experience it so deeply, and completely losing myself to it for years. And then
Mm-hmm.
slowly, bit by bit, through following my curiosities, through starting to take it easier on myself and becoming less, learning to take myself less seriously, and then piece by piece bringing in good energies and experimenting, exploring um, these different colors, if qualities, and and exploring differently helped me to connect to joy and peace and serenity, I know, forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
self-care. That started helping me. Then that started leading me forward
Mm-hmm.
in recognizing this feels nourishing, this feels good, I'm grounded, I'm actually not seeking, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
grasping for.
Yeah.
This is helping me feel grounded and present in myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels also this real description of what it feels like when you slowly are coming to peace with yourself and peace with your past and peace in the present moment. And there's something just so satisfying getting to that place right after having been in such a unaligned, grasping, what does Gabor Mate call it? Or no, he called it it's the Buddhist kind of idea of like the what is it called, like the ghosts that are the I'm not gonna, I can't think of it right now. The realm of the hungry
Hungry
ghosts.
ghosts. Yeah, yeah,
I find that so evocative, that
yeah.
imagery. Like when we're out of sorts with ourselves, we're in that world of the hungry ghost, and then slowly coming back into self and finding that peace. It's like getting out of that realm of the hungry ghost and grounding and being at peace in that moment. It's a really powerful place to be, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And that switch between that, trying to feed those, yeah, and versus real nourishment and discovery in that.
Yeah,
Like the profound piece for me is recognizing it's enjoyable to learn to enjoy the things that are good for me.
yeah,
And that discovery process gave me, what is really the self-discovery process that I went on.
yeah. Well, it
Learn
also
what was
feels like
actually good
you're,
for me.
yeah. Well, it sounds as though you're also describing this process of inner sovereignty. It's like
Yeah, right.
being in this environment that doesn't at all support who you really are,
Yeah.
going through this journey of discovery and slowly finding that place that actually works for you, and then claiming it. Be like, this is where I feel good, and
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, I see, like it resonates with you.
Yeah, because that's what I gave myself the chance of going through that that decade-long journey on my own, is to recognize I, the first person to really learn to love is myself, right? And to really be able to enjoy my own company, and really, yeah, like to learn that self-trust piece and to learn to take good care of myself on
Hmm.
my own. Hmm.
Because yeah, it's just, I mean, we learn this in so many different ways, but when we aren't at peace with ourselves, it is very, very difficult to be in a relationship with someone else.
Yeah.
It is just a reality, and it depends. We all live at different levels. But highly sensitives, and I totally agree. I totally am in cahoots with you on this one. It's like we're so sensitive that we need a very deep sense of feeling good in ourselves, and it's like if we don't figure out how to do that, it really feels like survival in a very intense way, right? Until we don't find that place, it just feels we're dying.
Yes, it
It's
does.
a very strong feeling, so I totally understand that. So since our theme is unconditional love, how would you like to talk about unconditional love in this context?
Hmm. Um, for me, the way I see unconditional love is what we're all learning, towards. It's a movement towards that sense of oneness. I don't know if many people on earth are capable of truly unconditional love, and what does that really mean, right? What does love really mean? And so for me, it's just recognizing that I can make a movement towards learning what unconditional love is.
Yeah.
and then through that exploration, understanding what love is. And for me, a beautiful way to see love for me is to be able to take it as yourself, take the other, take this world, take life as yourself, and value equally my and the other's goodness, well-being, health, possibilities in life. And it's through, over time, with learning wisdom from teachers and guides, and self-development and spirituality, and and exploring these beautiful wisdom offerings, that we are one, right? That we are love. We are Our energy is made of love, and when we feel that, is we're giving ourselves permission to be that and to move towards that.
Mhm.
Um,
So yeah, so like yeah, because it's a big question to define and distinguish between, say, love, desire, wanting the other person to meet our needs. It gets kind of all can get all confused with love, right?
yeah,
Being attracted to someone and thinking it's love, but it's not necessarily love. It's more of a still because love is not an egotistical
right.
space.
Mhm.
So what is really love? And I think it's a really good question that you bring up.
Yeah.
So, you're in a relationship now. How have this played out? Like sex, unconditional love, relationship. There's so many different dynamics that everyone has to sort of work through. Um, Sometimes people are disconnected, are just so involved in their professional lives. There's no room for actual real connection, or there's a feeling of connection, but whatever. There's so many different permutations. How does this play out for you?
Mhm. I recognize I was learning how to be more unconditionally loving with myself when I was journeying on my own, right? Learning to let go of those ideas of what I needed to be in order to feel good about myself, right? And over time, let that go. And as I allow myself just that unconditional love, I recognize my capacity to create success, to create in any area, just expanded naturally as I allowed myself to just accept myself and love.
Mm-hmm.
And then significantly, a friendship I developed in my late 20s, and this is after like almost a decade of not really developing any significant friendships. I met someone at a workplace I was at, and what I learned from him, and we experienced together, taught me more about unconditional love.
Mm.
Because he was a person that, before that journey, I would have never considered befriending, simply because my tunnel vision was very much just focused on other Asians, because that was kind of my socialization that I experienced in junior high and high school, that I was just comfortable with other Asians, or only other Asians would like can see me
Reach
in a
out,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then experiencing this beautiful friendship and learning so much about unconditional love in that relationship kind of helped me be prepared for when I kind of opened up to spirituality and spiritual guidance through readings, and being guided to move to Vancouver, right, to find my soulmate, if you will, and how I met my current partner, and just following these spiritual inspirations and kind of breadcrumbs my soul and spirit was leaving for me. And the relationship I am in now has taught me so much about what love means to me, and it's given me the chance to experience the movement towards unconditional love and learning unconditional love
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in my partnership. Hmm.
Well, just the whole idea of unconditional love needs some form of challenge, right? Because or else you're not challenged to unconditionally love,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
I don't know if there's anything you'd like to share about that, like some of the challenges that okay, I have to make
Yeah.
a choice here to re-choose this, or I
Hmm.
have to keep on loving, but maybe I need to make a choice that's other for myself in the practical space. There's different ways of looking at this, but is there anything where you've had to butt up against that space of needing to choose that unconditional or leaning into the unconditional?
Hmm. One of the the physical attractive piece for me when I was young was probably the most important piece for me when I was like considering partners, right? I was so enamored by the attractiveness of girls and women when I was young. So I thought that piece was so important for me. And even throughout my journey on my own, as I let go of that piece when it comes to like platonic friendships and whatnot, I recognized I still had that piece about who I was romantically involved with. And then it was interesting how it led to my partner. And when I first met her, didn't have that for her. I didn't have that physical attraction
Mm-hmm.
piece for her. But we were guided to like get to know each other. And so that was I went through so much learning in that, getting to learn to love another person and experiencing all these other layers of love. Because yeah, I thought that physical attraction piece was so vital as a man to
Yeah.
open up love.
Well, it's interesting because it also goes in the sort of like line of like, well, that's the trophy, right? It's like
Yeah,
trophy girlfriend. It's like if you get the trophy girlfriend, that means
yeah,
you're worth something.
exactly.
And so it sort of stays in that paradigm of performance and what the outside world is, how the outside world is evaluating you,
Yeah,
and your status on
yeah,
that totem pole.
yes, exactly.
um, but yeah, so what did you discover that wasn't about the physical attraction? Like, what were the other dimensions of love that you discovered?
Authenticity was a major one. The fact that I was so able to be my authentic self with her and explore what that means, right? After now so many years, it's like creating life together and just so much intimacy and authenticity and being so comfortable being myself. And therefore, I recognize I got to then for discover more of myself and bring more of myself out.
Mm.
And just just the immensity of joy and connection, intimacy, and just like deep conversations about anything and everything. That was so fulfilling and nourishing that I didn't even expect. Because yeah, I
You know
didn't
that
know how.
existed. You didn't know how
Yeah.
it existed. Yeah, it was almost like a relationship that gave you permission to discover yourself too.
Yeah.
Sometimes
So
I find it's really interesting how some relationships allow you to fall in love with yourself because the other person gives you so much space to be heard and to express yourself, and you're just like you just feel like wow, like I didn't even know all this existed in me. And there's this almost like falling in love with self through their eyes or their listening of us. Does that resonate to you in some way?
very much so. Yeah. hmm Very much so too, actually. And I felt the love from her, and it felt more unconditional than I've experienced previously, right? Like first my friend John, and then when I met yeah, my partner, just like yeah, just how much of that I felt from them, and therefore I was able to meet them towards that more and bring that out through myself.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that going through that, yeah, gave me much opportunities to do inner work with myself, and taking a look at whether that's true for me, whether that do I need that, or are these just conditioned ideas I have about what I want in a partner, or what partnership or relationships is about.
Mm. Mm.
hmm
Beautiful, beautiful. Um, the word permission is coming up for me. Like, you know, how many, like, it's beautiful how you describe this relationship with John and the friendship that got developed, and then meeting this other partner of yours. And it's sort of educating you on what's possible in terms of connecting to another human being. And it feels like this process of like allowing more and more permission to yourself to receive something that is something maybe you didn't even know existed. Like you say, like
Yeah.
it's that kind of path towards that feeling of wholeness and oneness. But it's like these dimensions of layered relationships that, previously you were like, yeah, I just wanted the trophy girlfriend. And I didn't know anything else was possible. And then it's like, oh, there's all these different possibilities of relating to another human being.
That really experiencing that really opened me up to be able to see more, to know more, to be curious about more in other people, to see the beauty in everyone more, right? To be
Mm,
willing to like be open to any kind of person and really see how I feel, and not just what my mind may assume or judge or expect,
mm.
but to truly, yeah, and that helped me discover more about myself. And I discovered more about myself. I was now learning more and more about really knowing others more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you mentioned this word of like judgment, because that feels like very key. Um, like the judgment piece, I think keeps us separated, keeps us, dissecting things and pulling things apart as opposed to opening up to an experience. Just seems like a really important element of shifting there.
Yeah, for me, it almost feels like, that projection piece and judgment. And then it's like
Yeah.
we're interacting with the version of the person we're perceiving or holding that
Yes.
judgment to. And we're interacting with that creation of ours while they're interacting with whatever they may be creating or projecting. And then, but to be able to drop that and to really connect and to really create that intimacy and share and get to know each other, I'm really learning how fulfilling and how much love there is to be experienced and shared.
Yeah, getting to that
Yeah,
place of what really is, like that
right.
what is place.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. We're coming to the end of our beautiful hour together, but is there
Mhm.
like one nugget of wisdom that you'd like to share with everyone that you feels like really important? Like if you had someone like a younger version of yourself coming and knocking on your door, what would you tell them?
Um, yeah, that everything you're moving through is an opportunity to learn about yourself, right? And it's like, and the kind of like the challenging emotions that you're experiencing will show you something about yourself, about the way you're thinking about yourself. Because now the way I see it, when it's like you your mind creates all these thoughts and creates those challenging emotions, the fact that they feel challenging uh, is something there for you to be aware of, to take a look
Sounds
at.
like you're like describing what it feels like to be in the matrix, and then when you're outside of the matrix, looking in, seeing the matrix happen.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, this was an awesome conversation, Daniel, and thank you for being so open and sincere and authentic and sharing your heart with us. It's really important, I think, in such radical times
Mm-hmm.
and radicalizing times.
Yeah.
Come back to these essential pieces, right?
I guess I will just say it's like no matter how deep down you go into your suffering, no matter how broken you feel you are, or how much work you feel you need to do, like you can do it. There is a way. In fact, that shows you your strength, how far you've allowed yourself to go down to explore your depth, in a sense,
Wow,
to
that's
to
really
ex, to
sweet.
explore the darkness, because from there you can grow your roots that much deeper and rise up and uplift yourself that much higher.
Yeah, and that's really beautiful. And like, I almost feel that people that do have these, you know, quote unquote karmas, of like really having a very difficult situation they have to overcome, I mean, it really is an opportunity for growth. Like we can't develop our muscles if we don't have some form of resistance, you know? So if there was no gravity on the earth, like we'd be like very flimsy human beings with not a lot of ton. We didn't have a lot of definition, you know. So yeah, so there is that need of some form of challenge to overcome, or else there isn't that possibility of growth, right?
Yeah, it's just like whatever is in your life, you're strong enough to
Overcome.
overcome and handle it. But support is going to help. So be willing to
Absolutely.
learn to support yourself and find the support that you need.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, if anyone's looking for some support, I know Daniel is offering it. So how about you tell us what you offer? That way people can find you.
Yeah, I offer coaching and tarot readings as well. And my practice is very holistic. I've been developing various pieces of my framework, if you will. So yeah, if you are in need of some guidance, some support, please feel free to reach out to me and we can have a conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, there's nothing like having support from someone who has got into the bottom of the barrel and came out of it. So there's some integrated wisdom that is coming your way when you're working with Daniel. So thank you so much. Um, Also, just being a presence of peace and serenity. Like I just have that experience whenever I talk to you. Like there's this kind of like what you talked about, like that letting go of that grasping energy. There's no more grasping energy. It's just like this is an acceptance, and there's something really beautiful about witnessing someone who has accepted their situation. So thank you for just being that here and sharing that with us. And really excited to keep on co-creating with you and talking to you and discovering new dimensions and seeing you grow. So yeah, sending you lots of love, and hopefully all our listenership has enjoyed and got something out of it too. So you can always send us little messages if you thought it was really interesting, and if there's something you want to ask us, totally send it to us. Okay, so I'm gonna say goodbye to everyone, and
Thank you, Julie.
yeah.
Yep. Thank you so much, everyone. So appreciate this opportunity.
So next in the series, next week I have this couple that are from this company called Leap Zone, and they've been a sort of couplepreneurship for 30 years. And they really want to talk about unconditional love, and they're really dynamic people. One of them is works with horses, very intuitive horse whisperer. The other one is, someone who's been on different TED Talk stages, and she's just this dynamic, rocket of energy. So it'll be really interesting to see them and see what they have to say. So I'm going to do that next Friday. And in between that, next Tuesday, I'm going to be with Banyan Books on their online portal to, instead of having a live one, we all wanted live. We all want live things now by in person type experiences. And the whole bookstore experience and launching books in bookstores is so fun. But yeah, it's still not completely there yet. Our society is still not completely there yet in terms of getting back to our normal place of interacting. But so we're going to do an online Zoom. And if anyone has been reading my book or are curious about it and they want to ask me questions, it's going to be next week, and I'll be posting about it this week so people can just sign up and be on that Zoom call. So, muchas gracias. It was lots of fun spending time with you, and big hugs to everyone, and see you soon.